Previously on Jake Tran.
So you run a country and you have a problem. Every few years, you have to get re-elected. So that's why your number one priority as a noble leader is growth. Economic growth. The only way you're gonna get more economic growth is if you have a giant segment of your population that hates their lives.
The reason we are the world's superpower, the reason we are the top economic engine in the world,
right,
is because we have created this massive
class,
class of cogs.
Yeah.
Right? Cogs that are dissatisfied, angry, frustrated. You know, they bitch about it when they go home. They struggle for 35 years and they complain, but they still do it.
So in 1914, Henry Ford debuted something revolutionary, the 40-hour work week. Rockefeller used the General Education Board to inject billions of dollars into the education system to mold it into his liking, and so the middle class flooded in to buy homes. Just like with mortgages, the government started guaranteeing student loans. Gradually, more and more employers started requiring college degrees for nearly all the 9-to-5 jobs out there. And when you combine all these three pillars together, it's clear why for most people, it feels like no matter how hard they work, no matter how hard they hustle, they can never seem to move up in life. And finally, we saw the rise of the gig economy, with gig jobs like Uber and DoorDash, where as a gig worker, you get to have all the downsides of being both a contractor and a 9-to-5 worker, with none of the upside. When the co-founder of LinkedIn predicts that 9-to-5 jobs are set to go extinct in 10 years. Which means that today, the middle class and the lower class is at a crossroads. On one path, you can lie on your back and accept your fates. You can wait until the 9-to-5 job eventually gets phased out in 10 years or so. You can wait until Social Security implodes around the same time in 2035 because it's a literal Ponzi scheme. You can hustle and take on multiple gigs, working more than the 40 hours you would be working right now at a 9-to-5, with a very slim chance of ever saving enough to even retire. All the while, the great melt-up happens and inflation erases what's left of whatever money you have. But I bet that if you're still watching this right now, you know deep down in your heart that you have to make it. You know that deep down you weren't meant for the slow boil of being a cog in the machine. You know that you gotta keep pushing. But how? How are you gonna take advantage of these next 10 to 12 months when your 9-to-5 job is already not cutting it? How are you gonna take advantage of these next 10 to 12 months if investing also isn't cutting it? So clearly something here has to change.
Welcome to part 2.
These next 4 years with Trump in charge will be the easiest time in recent history to make money and build your wealth. And with 9-to-5 jobs being replaced by gig workers and cheap workers overseas, with the great melt-up right around the corner after Trump leaves office, as the government debt keeps hockey sticking, these next 10 to 12 months are your last chance to escape the middle class with relative ease by making as much money as you can and pouring that money into assets before everything gets more expensive from inflation. Because in reality, you really only have around 12 months or so to set something up that makes you additional income so that you have the remaining 3 years to actually gain from this golden age. 12 months is all you got to make as much money as possible before assets and prices start soaring. But how? Well, to make an extraordinary amount of money in a very short period of time, it's gonna require some extraordinary thinking. If you think like a worker like they condition you in school, it will lead you to take the same actions as a worker, which would then make you get the same outcome as a worker, which is why this part 2 is so important. If you don't uninstall the years of conditioning they shoved down your throat since preschool, then no matter how hard you try, you will always be doomed to fail. They say the most important decision you ever make is the person you decide to marry. I disagree. I think the most important decision you will ever make are the principles you choose to believe in. The wrong principles, like you need luck to be successful or that you need money to make money, will make you give up before you even start. It will make you self-sabotage yourself. It will guarantee you to a life of poverty. But the right principles will make winning almost an inevitability. So let's go over the principles you need to ascend from the middle class before it's too late. Let your reconditioning commence. Throughout our time in the education system, we've been conditioned to think that luck is just something some people are born with. That those people over there, yeah, they just got lucky. But you have to be realistic. And when you watch these founder stories on YouTube, you'll hear the same thing. You'll hear founders say that, oh, I just got lucky. I was just at the right place at the right time, nothing to see here.
I think misunderstand is how lucky I was.
When in reality, this answer is complete BS. These people are either giving a cop-out answer because they don't truly understand how they got there, or they're lying to come off humble to make themselves more likable. That I'm nothing special, I'm just like you. You have no reason to resent me. But was it really just luck? Well, think about it this way. If I strolled into a bad neighborhood wearing a Rolex and I got robbed, was I actually unlucky? Or did I just end up in an unlucky environment where I was a million times more likely to get robbed? The same can be said about getting lucky enough to escape the middle class. And sure, there are people that win the lottery, but time and time again we see them lose it all, because they never develop the skill to keep the money. But when it comes to founders and entrepreneurs that actually started from nothing, was it really just luck? Or did they just stumble upon a lucky environment where they're a million times more likely to hit it big? Did they just stumble upon a different game where it's even possible to hit it big? If you work the average 9-to-5 job, what is the most amount of money you could possibly ever make in a year? $100,000, $200,000, maybe even $500,000 at a finance job after many decades? That's it. There's literally a 0.0% chance of you ever getting lucky and getting $1 million fast, $10 million, or $100 million. But the chances of you getting that in business, the chances are definitely over 0%. In fact, in some businesses, I would say the chances are a lot higher than 0%. So do you need luck in life? Or do you just need to play a different game that the school system and job system hid from you? You want to imagine a traditional 9-to-5 job as residing in a country the author Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls Mediocrestan. In Mediocrestan, things are limited by the physical world, so you can't get extreme outcomes. Height is located in Mediocrestan. You can never be 100 foot tall. Weight is located in Mediocrestan. Someone can weigh 500 pounds, but you can never weigh 1,000,000 pounds. And traditional jobs are in Mediocrestan, because they're limited by your labor, your elbow grease. You can put in 80 hours a week, but never 1,000 hours a week. Which means there's zero chance of your boss ever saying, "Hey Timmy, you're gonna get $1 billion bonus today because of how many hours you put in." But if we take a stroll to a strange country called Extremistan, extreme outcomes are not only possible, but they happen all the time. Take book sales for example. Line up 1,000 authors and take a look at their book sales. And what you'll find is that it's possible for you to have a J.K. Rowling in the crowd that has sold 600 million copies. This is because book sales are a social matter. They're not limited by the physical world, unlike how many hours you can work. J.K. Rowling's quote-unquote luck was only possible because she chose to play in Extremistan. And guess what else is a social matter? Business. So business is also in Extremistan. Line up 1,000 people, and it's possible for you to have a business person with $1 million net worth next to a person with $100 million, next to Elon Musk with over $300 billion. But if they stayed in the Mediocrestan world of traditional 9-to-5 jobs, they would all be guaranteed to be just like the masses, average. Which brings us to the first principle you need to escape the middle class. Luck does not exist in the world of 9-to-5 jobs that Henry Ford invented. But luck sure does exist over in Henry Ford's world of not having your income be tied to how many hours you put in. So to get quote-unquote lucky, you need to set something up that gives you additional income while not being tied to how many hours you work. You need to set up an additional income stream in Extremistan. But fair warning, not all games in Extremistan are treated equal. There are some games in Extremistan where you can win big and fast, and your life is amazing. Yes, make money fast is actually a thing. While other games take years and years of grinding to finally win it big. For example, you might have heard of starting a marketing agency. The only problem is, it's a living hell to scale. And when the economy does go down, companies usually fire their marketing agencies first. Physical businesses are also a living hell to scale, because it's also tied to the physical world. If you need a physical location or you're providing services or manufacturing a physical product, it's gonna be a slow and hard grind. I have a physical business now, Evil Goods, and my god, things move so much slower when there's people and manufacturing and shipping involved. The income stream you pick also needs to have extremely high profit margins. Most retailers, their net profit margin is anywhere from around 0.5% to maybe 8%. That is like walking on a tightrope. One mistake, one recession, and you're gonna have a very rough time. Just think about all the low margin businesses that shut down during 2020. 50% profit margin is better, and it may sound like a lot, but even then, expenses easily get out of hand. One major change in your market and you could easily be knocked down to 1 to 10% profit margin real fast. And with the bumpy road ahead of us, you have to have an income stream with 60 to 90% profit margin. That way, in a worst case scenario, you have a lot of room for mistakes and emergencies. To reduce your risk even more, you have to pick an income stream that has been proven to work and make money already. The opposite of this would be trying to discover a new pharmaceutical drug, very risky. And lastly, you have to pick an income stream that also rides a trend. Jeff Bezos rode the trend of online shopping. Mark Zuckerberg rode the trend of social networking. Trends create wealth. Trends make it easier to make money. It gives you more room for mistakes, versus getting into something that is already dying down or that no one knows about. And as I mentioned in part 1, one of those trends happening right now is how we're replacing 9-to-5 employees with gig workers and cheap overseas workers that go as low as $3 an hour. So if you can find a trend that also takes advantage of this trend, it's gonna give you one hell of an advantage. So whatever income stream you pick in Extremistan, 1, it can't be too hard to scale, 2, it can't rely on the physical world too much, 3, it has to give you 60 to 90% profit margins, 4, it has to follow a proven system already, and 5, it has to ride a trend. But even if you find the right income stream in Extremistan, if you don't have the next anti-pillar, the next principle, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail. Take a look at Nike and Nvidia, some of the most valuable companies in the world. Do they actually produce anything? Surprisingly, no. Do they do any of the actual labor? Again, surprisingly, no. These companies make billions, and yet all they do is come up with ideas. Nike comes up with shoe designs, they come up with how to market it, and then they outsource all the actual labor that Americans used to do to super cheap workers overseas. And yet, even though Nike doesn't do any of the hard labor, they're still worth over $1 billion. In fact, I would say they're worth more because they don't do the hard labor. Nvidia, the company that makes all the AI computer chips, is the same. You would think a chip company would make chips, but they don't. They come up with the designs for the chips, they come up with how to market the chips, and then they outsource all the super complex manufacturing to chip fabricators like TSMC. Computer chips are some of the most complex things to manufacture in the world. And yet, Nvidia is still worth 4 times more than TSMC, at over $3 trillion at the time of writing. The person that came up with the idea is 4 times wealthier than the one that does all the super complex hard work of actually building computer chips. Pretty crazy, right? Or take Boeing. Does Boeing actually do any of the real hard labor anymore? No! Putting aside how evil Boeing is, Boeing got huge for a reason. It's because they don't do the hard labor themselves. They come up with the ideas for the designs, and then they pass off the majority of the actual grunt work to subcontracted factories and engineering firms. That's right, Boeing hardly even does the engineering anymore. Even most engineering is considered grunt work and is relegated to the engineering majors that are willing to get paid by the hour. And you even see this with pop stars. Do pop stars do any of the raw labor? No, they come up with the overall branding of their music, they come up with the vibe, maybe a rough demo, and then the actual laborers like the producers, engineers, and songwriters do everything else. Yes, today's world does not reward hard work, or else the janitor, the school teacher, and the personal trainer will be rich. No, today's world rewards smart work. Those who think the most. Yes, there's the word again, thinking. And yet, guess what every single 9-to-5 job out there has you do? At a 9-to-5 job, do you think about problems and find solutions on your own? Or do you wait for your boss to hand you some oh-so-convenient instructions that lays out exactly what to do in exchange for a fixed paycheck in return? That's right, no thinking required. See, every 9-to-5 job is purely about doing the labor, and I'm not just talking about digging ditches here. No, manual labor includes the accountants, the engineers, the doctors that are on the floor doing the actual hard work. And yet people wonder why the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. They wonder why the wealth gap keeps getting bigger. They wonder why they see all this money floating around, all these prices increasing, and yet their paycheck always stays the same. They wonder why we've lost our manufacturing jobs, why we're losing our 9-to-5 jobs in favor of cheaper gig workers. It's because America is now an economy based on thinking. And in this thinking economy, those who think get everything, and those who mindlessly work hard like the good citizen they're supposed to be, get to stay exactly where they're at and get to fend for the scraps. Nassim Nicholas Taleb puts it another way. If you're an idea person, you do not have to work hard, only think intensely. And yet you wonder why they condition you not to think since you were 4 years old. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's great, Jake, but I'm not a creative person. I'm not an idea person. I'm not smart. How could I ever make it in this new world then? But that's exactly what they want you to think. Think back to when you were a kid. Think back to how curious you were, how creative you were, how you constantly asked questions, how you constantly came up with ideas and tried stuff, how you constantly wondered how things worked, how innocently open you were to the world. What happened to that child? Well, I think you know by now. The school system systematically beat that out of you. It punished you for coloring outside the lines. It punished you for being creative. It punished you for thinking for yourself. See, we all have this ability to think. We all have this ability to be creative. It's genetically encoded in every one of us. It's what separates us from the animals, and it's just waiting to be ignited within you. But just like how if you never exercise your entire life, if no one's ever taught you how to exercise, then yeah, getting started exercising is gonna feel really awkward at first. It's gonna feel really unintuitive. It's gonna feel really discouraging. But once you get over that initial hump, life changes forever. The same goes with thinking. If you've been a victim of the education system, and you've never really been encouraged to use your brain most of your life, if you've never been taught how to think critically, if you've never gotten the opportunity to come up with ideas on your own at the jobs you've worked at, then yeah, thinking critically is gonna feel really hard. If I told you right now to set a timer for 30 minutes and just sit down and write, where you just brainstorm ideas on how to solve a problem you're going through right now, or to come up with ideas on how to make more money for the next 30 minutes straight, I actually recommend you do this, by the way. I bet you that it's gonna feel really difficult. I bet that you're gonna want to give up. I bet that your mind is gonna want to wander to check Instagram. I bet that it's gonna feel way harder than just working your job. Oh, isn't that interesting? That they've made manual labor feel easier than thinking. And yet thinking, literally just sitting down and using your brain, is the exact thing that will help you become free. Every rags to riches story, every fortune, every invention made has come from the simple act of thinking. There's a reason why the most famous book on money and success that is loved by Conor McGregor, Barbara and Damon of Shark Tank, and many more is called Think and Grow Rich instead of Work Hard and Grow Rich. Now, this is not an excuse not to work hard. You should do both.
There comes a point in time where you've got to figure out the answers yourself. Right. Because learning how to solve problems, learning how to find answers, being curious enough to find solutions on your own is where successful businesses come from.
Yeah.
If you're always looking to say, well, what should I do?
Right.
You're already have lost.
And just like with exercise or sports, the more you think, the better you're gonna get at it. No high IQ required. How can I be sure that you don't need to be a genius to be able to succeed? Well, when you start getting in these circles, you start meeting a lot of dumb people that make a lot of money. And on top of that, you don't have to start thinking from scratch. In fact, the best way to do this is to find a business model that works and model their thinking. For example, if we pretended that marketing agencies were actually good and easy to scale, then we could take that model, copy most of it, and then we could use our thinking power to find ways to make it our own and make it better. That way, 90% of the thinking is already done for us and proven to work, but you still have to use that 10% to take it to the next level. This is one of the only true shortcuts there is, and with this Trump economy ahead and the great melt-up afterwards, you have to use this shortcut. Which brings us to the second anti-pillar you need to escape the middle class. Model thinking that works and take it from there. Our entire lives, we've had to wait for instructions from completely incompetent people who have never made money. Or we've had to wait for instructions from people who don't have our best interests at heart, our bosses. So it's time to take control. It's time for you to choose to follow the thinking of people who are actually competent, who actually have the results and the life you want, and then to use your own thinking to take it one step further and make it your own. Now, everything we've talked about so far, setting up an additional income stream in Extremistan, making sure you pick the right income stream, making sure you model thinking that has already been proven to be successful, that's already going to give you a huge shortcut. This is already going to reduce the majority of your risks. But does that mean you need to quit your job right now and go all in? Well, no, you don't have to, especially if you have kids and stuff that you need to take care of. But fear not, because that is where the barbell strategy comes in, where you can get the best of both worlds, the certainty and stability of a job and the life-changing gains of Extremistan. The barbell strategy is where you keep your stable job in Mediocristan while you take swings in Extremistan in your free time. That way you get the best of both worlds. You get the certainty of Mediocristan and the extreme rewards of Extremistan. And today, since we have the internet where you can learn what tends to work in Extremistan, where we can study successful people online and learn their way of thinking, what took Ray Kroc knocking on thousands of doors before stumbling on the McDonald's brothers, we can compress that into a matter of months or maybe even weeks for a tiny fraction of the cost. That way you can increase your odds of hitting it out the park with every swing you take. And the best thing about the barbell strategy is even if you do fail, you will still live the exact same life you were gonna live before anyways. Think about it, if you never clicked on this video, you were gonna live your current life today anyways without realizing it. So with the barbell strategy, there is no downside. In fact, the only real downside is knowing that there's a better life out there and not even trying. And the great thing is that in Extremistan, you only have to be right once and your life changes forever. And every successful person knows this.
Right, I tell people all the time, no one counts your failures. You just have to be right one time.
You just have to try different things, and even if 99% of them fail, you only have to be right one time. You don't have to figure it all out in advance.
Entrepreneurial ventures fail all the time. Most of my companies failed. I actually started 7 companies, and I've launched about 40 or 50 projects over my career. So it's a low hit rate over your career, but you only have to be right once.
So if you want to escape the middle class, you need anti-pillar number 3, the barbell strategy. But even with all of this, if you fall for the debt traps they set out for you, like buying a house on a mortgage or getting student loans like we talked about in part 1, this bad debt would be like strapping weights onto your ankles. It would just slow you down and keep you working forever like they want you to. Every dollar that goes out of your pocket every month to bad debt is money that could be going towards scooping up assets that work for you while Trump is still in office and before the great melt-up. Because even when it comes to your home, even if you do make money when you sell, real estate is in Mediocristan. It's impossible for you to get crazy Extremistan returns since it's a physical thing tied to the real world. And if you're a beginner with limited time, limited money, and we want the fastest route possible, shouldn't we choose the option with the highest upside and the lowest downside? So let's go over the assets you should be putting your money into before the great melt-up. And just like how all the principles we covered so far model what the rich do and how they think, for this next principle, we're gonna model how the rich invest. When it comes to real estate, people gravitate towards it because real estate is this tangible thing that people can easily understand. They can see and touch their house, versus vague things like bonds or REITs. But in reality, real estate is only worth it if you get into huge deals like giant hotels or skyscrapers like Trump, which is obviously not easy to get into. And sure, you can take out a loan and flip a house for $50,000 or $100,000 in profit. You can buy a rental property and write off some money in taxes. But again, these returns are tied to the real world, so it's pretty hard to make a life-changing amount of money all at once and really fast. When it comes to investing in stocks and crypto, I like it, but the problem is if you only have $100,000 to invest, for example, the stock market returns an average of 10%. That's just $10,000. It's not going to make a dent in your lifestyle. Even if you get a 50% return or even a 100% return in Bitcoin, that's still only $100,000. And although you see some people making money with Bitcoins, people only post when they win. So for every winner you see in Bitcoins, there are the other 99.999% of people who lost all their life savings to those few winners.
By the way, 95% of people do not make money here. You have better odds in Vegas.
It really is gambling. And if it's our life on the line, which it is, we need more certainty than gambling. And sure, you can make money with day trading if you want to replace your 9-to-5 job with staring at charts all day, and having your income be linked to your mood and the ups and downs of the market. The fact of the matter is, if you look at any rich person, the only place they invest is in themselves and their business. If there was a magical box where you could put $1 in and you're guaranteed to never lose any money and only get more money back, whether it's $1,000 or $100,000 back, why would you not put as many dollars into that box as possible? That is what investing in yourself is like. Elon Musk famously bought textbooks to read to learn rocket science for SpaceX. And if you look at his wealth, almost all of it has come from investing in his own companies. Investing in yourself is like giving yourself the ability to fish. Except there's no limit, you can only get better at fishing, and eventually you'll be able to reel in whales on your own. And once these rich people make their money, then they pour that money into traditional investments like stocks or real estates. And once you experience these kinds of returns from investing in yourself, once you've trained yourself to be comfortable in Extremistan thanks to the barbell strategy, to be comfortable thinking on your own, where you're in tune with who you truly are and you understand what you're capable of, which is kind of what this docuseries is all about. When you have all of that, why would you ever invest in anyone else but yourself? And once you make a bunch of money from investing in yourself, then you can play around with all the traditional investments that the rich use. And just like investing in the stock market, investing in yourself compounds. It's gonna be slow at first, it's gonna feel like nothing's happening. But before you know it, you're gonna be able to move mountains just by lifting a finger. Investing in yourself, the fifth anti-pillar. It's the only investment that truly has zero downside and infinite upside, short of insider trading. But there's one last piece of conditioning that they've weighed us down with that we need to get rid of. Ask anyone on the street to finish the sentence, money is the root of all what? And they'll automatically respond with evil without hesitation. But is it? One thing I read early on in my journey that changed my life forever is that you have to treat success as your moral duty. Don't view success as a nice to have, as in it would be nice if I was successful. Treat it as your moral duty to yourself, your parents, your community, and especially to your inner child. Because after all, no matter how generous you are, no matter how much of a good heart you have, you can't pour from an empty cup. Even if you volunteer your time for 80 hours a week, how much good could you really do? Versus if you had millions to deploy. The world needs you at your best. The world needs that unique thing inside you that only you can offer. The world needs you to have money, because God knows those who have the money right now aren't doing us any favors. So is money evil? Money is morally neutral. It's just that those without morals are the ones that tend to chase it. And like it or not, money does make the world go round. The world is the way it is with all its faults because of who currently controls the money. So isn't it time for us to even the playing field? Isn't it time for us to start gathering some of the chips on our side of the table? And with the middle class on the decline, with a quarter of all adults over 50 never being able to retire, with all the wealth going to the thinkers instead of the laborers, with wages flatlining and prices rising, with the death of 9-to-5 jobs and its comfy retirement plans coming in 10 years, with the government's own retirement plan set to implode at the exact same time in 2033, according to the horse's own mouth, with only 12 or so months for you to set up something that takes advantage of this crazy market that Trump is creating, so you actually have time and money to reap some of these gains, success really is your duty. So I ask you again, will you be one of the few that rise to the occasion, that join the rich once this great melt-up happens? Or will you be one of the many that get inflated into poverty? And if I was starting from zero, I would treat this as your last chance to escape the middle class. Because once Trump leaves office, once the dollar starts entering into hyperinflation, once a potential World War III kicks off, you're gonna look back and realize that, man, this really was your last chance to escape the middle class with ease. So I hope you can see now that we really did need to go over all these principles first, because without them, you can see how easy it would be to give up. And now that you're armed with them, in part 3 of this docuseries, we're gonna go over how more and more people are using these principles to escape the middle class than ever before. And now that you're armed with them, in part 3 of this docuseries, we're gonna go over what's happening in the world right now that will allow you to put these principles into action, so it's not just useless theory. Because once you put these principles into action and you find the right income stream for this golden age, that is how you ascend from the middle class once and for all. Part 3 is by far the most important episode in the series, because you're gonna learn exactly what needs to be done in order to leverage this golden age, so that you too can create the life you've always dreamed of. You've seen the why, you know what to do. Now it's time to show you how to do it. So click the card on the screen or click the link below to watch part 3 now. And as always, from the bottom of my heart, stay dangerous.